It's kind of gross. You got Cora's running around with that dress. You know, she's sweaty and yeasty, and it's kind of nasty. And worst of all, without razors, do you picture hairy oral sex on the frontier?
I mean, yeah.
Oh,
like,
no.
They barely have anything to live for.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I'm one of your hosts, Ash, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And returning again from Real Spoilers with Gene Lyons out of town, we're so excited to welcome back Kevin, my white son, Brackett.
Lilu Dallas Multipass.
Well, each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide for you, the audience, the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening, and if you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all the information or past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. Now, all that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
Well, Ash, this week, I'm very excited. You know, Gene's away, and normally that could be a sad thing, but it's a very happy day here out on the Western frontier, because we have a local militia that we can often go to, Kevin Brackett. And Kevin is probably, if you don't know him, one of the most prolific podcasters out there. He posts shit constantly. I feel like we are like running at ragged's end when we have like movies and TV. And then Kevin makes me feel like shit.
I'm sorry. It's not on purpose. Thank you guys for having me back. I'm always happy to fill in when needed. And, everyone has their own thing. I think you guys are active on the Twitch and your Discord and all that. So I've got a lot more free time to post stuff.
Yeah. So this week, we're excited to have you aboard, Kevin. And one of our listeners, Daniel H., wanted us to go back to 1757 in the French and Indian War and review the 1992 Daniel Day-Lewis classic, The Last of the Mohicans.
Well, and our generous commissioner wrote in and said, "Hey, Shat crew, I'm a big fan of your Shat podcast, and I've been listening to them now for a few years. I first stumbled across your work by total happenstance when looking at options for a Game of Thrones Season 7 podcast. I was hooked immediately by your chemistry together, and listening to your cast after watching a new episode became something I really started to look forward to every week. After a couple of months, this led me to your Shat the Movies podcast, and I've never looked back. I know that all work must be a grind, but y'all really bring a joy and camaraderie to every episode that really is wonderful. Anyway, the reason I'm sending this email is that I wanted to commission a movie for your review, the 1992 Michael Mann action adventure, The Last of the Mohicans. This was one of the first movies that I can remember seeing in the theater growing up, and it really stuck with me. The sweeping cinematography, the amazing score, they really thoroughly pulled me into the movie, even as a kid when I couldn't even spell cinematography. And I can still remember the shock I felt during the scene when, spoiler alert, Magua cuts out Colonel Monroe's heart and holds it up. While it's certainly not a perfect movie, it's just such a marvelous adventure in a time period that's rarely featured in film. Last of the Mohicans is why I go to the movies. It's not immensely historically accurate and the romance gets soapy, but damned if it isn't 100% entertaining. I mean, Michael Mann and Daniel Day-Lewis, how could you not want to see that? And the last chase sequence, every aspect of the movie clicks, and for me, it's one of the most memorable moments in film. I'd love to hear you praise or absolutely lambast it on the air in the future. Thanks so much for all you do, Daniel H. Well, Last of the Mohicans is a 1992 epic historical drama set in 1757 during the French and Indian War. It was directed by Michael Mann and was based on the 1826 novel The Last of the Mohicans, a narrative of 1757 by James Fenimore Cooper, and the 1936 film adaptation, owing more to the film than the novel. The film stars Daniel Day-Lewis and Madeleine Stowe, with Jodhi May, Russell Means, Wes Studi, Eric Schweig, and Stephen Waddington in supporting roles. The soundtrack features music by Trevor Jones and Randy Edelman. The main theme of the film is taken from the tune The Gale by Scottish singer-songwriter Dougie MacLean. Released in the United States on September 25th, 1992, The Last of the Mohicans was met with positive reviews and commercial success during its box office run. It won the Academy Award for Best Sound, the only Oscar won by a film directed by Mann. Day-Lewis received his second nomination for the BAFTA Award for Best Actor in a leading role for his performance. So before we begin, we always ask the question, where were you and what are the memories you have of this movie? And tonight we're going to start with you, Big D.
So this is a painful review for me because I vividly remember where I was. I was in college. I saw this with my girlfriend, the one who had taken my virginity.
Aww.
I loved her way more than she loved me. And it made this movie painful. I was Duncan. She was my Cora. I felt pathetic. I felt needy. I was sitting in the movie. I remember like trying to hold her hand. I could feel her pulling away. And we broke up shortly after, and I guess they're right. Friendship isn't enough to base a relationship on. But this was a string of movies where I was just hypersensitive, like Legend of the Fall. That's another one that I remember like being painfully awkward. And just,
were you Alfred or the brother that dies due to the tear gas?
No, I was there suffering. No, I wish I had died. No, I was the one who was suffering there, pining away while
you
Brad
were Brad.
Pitt was,
so you were Alfred. Yeah.
Yes, I was Alfred.
Yeah.
So watching this movie, I can remember walking out of the theater in Long Island and feeling hopelessly lost. And it connected with me in a way that was very painful.
Man, it's so dark and sad. I mean, for me, it brings up happy memories. So we traveled every Thanksgiving growing up to the Smoky Mountains, and it's some of my favorite memories. We would go and we'd stay in like Sevierville and Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge, and we'd always drive over to Asheville. And so I remember this movie mostly because when I was a kid, my parents were like really excited that it was filmed there in the Smokies and in the national park. And so every year we would go after 92, it'd be like, oh, this is where Hawkeye looked out. Or can't you imagine that this is where they were running through the forest and found the frontiersmen that were dead? And it was a big deal to my mom to watch these mountains in this movie. And speaking of my mom, I talk about my dad a lot on this podcast because most movies that we talk about, the cool stuff I saw with my dad, those are my best memories of him as a kid. And I don't talk about my mom a lot because my mom hates scary movies. She doesn't like sci-fi movies. She doesn't like a lot of comedy. So we don't get to talk about Deborah films often. But this is a Deborah film. My mom loves this film. And when I was a kid, I didn't get why my mom watched it so much, but she would watch this movie all the time. And it's like now what she does with that show Outlander. And there, like she like lusts after him the way that she lusts after Daniel Day-Lewis in this movie. And now that I'm a grown up, I get it completely. Mom, if you're listening, her birthday was yesterday, so happy birthday. I get it. Thank you so much for introducing me to Daniel Day-Lewis because I think in part he made me a woman.
Well, I don't have any kind of a fancy story, nothing like you two, but this is something that I remember going to Blockbuster as a kid and seeing on the shelf in VHS and just wondering what that was. And my mom told me it was a great film. And so I watched it when I was really young, but I didn't appreciate it. I didn't understand anything. I wasn't old enough to realize how much of a dreamboat Daniel Day-Lewis was and is. So, it's a movie that really, my memory of it is being told it was a great movie, watching it, and just kind of it came and went. But I also remembered it being long. I thought this was a 3-hour movie.
I totally agree.
I was very confused when it was only 2 hours and appreciative of that, watching it recently. But yeah, I didn't realize it was only 2 hours. So I think that it feels more epic. And so I kind of misremembered the running time of it.
Well, I'm ready to put on my thirsty mom hat here and return back to the Smoky Mountains of old. And let's play that trailer.
It's not as I imagined it would be, thinking of it in Boston.
Frontier is the only land available to people. Out here, they're beholden to none.
As a new land was being carved out of an untamed frontier.
Just dropped in to see how you boys is doing.
One man, defiantly courageous, stood his ground.
I thought all our colonial scouts were in the militia.
I ain't your scout. You sure ain't no damn militia.
One woman, fiercely independent, followed her spirit.
My father warned me about people like you. He said, do not try to understand them. Do not try to make them understand you.
Thank you so much.
They shared an adventure.
It was a war party. That means they're gonna be attacking up and down the frontier.
That took them from the edge of the wilderness.
He saved us. We're alive only because of him. Are those the actions of a criminal?
And into each other's hearts.
Why didn't you leave when you had the chance?
Because what I'm interested in is right here.
You've done everything you could do. Save yourself!
Stay alive, no matter what occurs. I will find you. No matter how long it takes, no matter how far, I will find you.
Academy Award winner Daniel Day-Lewis, Madeleine Stowe. The last of the Mohicans.
In 1757, British Army Major Duncan Hayward arrives in New York during the French and Indian War. He is assigned to Colonel Edmund Monroe, the commander of Fort William Henry, and tasked with escorting Monroe's two daughters, Cora and Alice, to their father. Before they leave, Hayward asks Cora to marry him. A Mohawk named Magua is tasked with guiding Hayward and his party, but Magua is actually a Huron and leads them into an ambush. A Mohican father, his son Uncas, and his white adopted son Hawkeye arrive and kill all of the Hurons except Magua, who escapes. On their way to the fort, the group finds a massacre at a farm.
So traditionally each week when the movie comes up, Gene Lyons will give us a heads up and say, hey, this movie is on Hulu, this movie is on Amazon. But what I'll do is I'll use one of our partner apps, which is Just Watch, and I'll look it up. And this time I found out this was available on iTunes to rent for $3.99 or to buy for $4.99. So I was like, whew, I got to buy it. And I got the director's cut with the director's behind the scenes, his commentary, and I watched half of the movie with it. And it was really, really interesting. Just talking about the frontier life, that when the movie starts out, there's not a lot of dialogue. You're supposed to understand what's going on. And that when they were expanding west, after 7 years of indentured servitude, people could go out and get a piece of land. But all the good land, the fertile soil, the one that's near the coast, all that shit was taken. So the only thing left was at the edge of like the frontier. It was the very, very edge. And only 50% of the frontier families survived their first winter. So watching this movie, I was just taken back on what a miserable existence this looks like.
Yeah, it had to like suck. Like, I mean, I don't understand how we have any ancestors at all.
No.
Because like my ancestors didn't have money. Like they weren't part of the Colonel Munros of the world. They were like the ones that were in like indentured servitude. And I don't know how any of them survived other than just like blind luck.
I don't think any of us would make it today.
No.
God,
there's
no.
no way people today could make it, a couple hundred years ago surviving things like that.
I wouldn't even try. I would just live in the city on a factory, be miserable, and die at like 35. There's no way I'm going to go out there. Bears, Native Americans, the winter, trying to raise crops. No, thank you.
We're just like constantly waiting for your death to come in like horrendous ways. Why they're doing an exposure or like a random lightning strike or a monsoon or bears, like you said.
Yeah, I like leaving my house and not worrying if I'm going to come back and find it burned to the ground and my family murdered.
We're very lucky to be alive when we are.
Yes.
We're weak. We're weak people. Well, one person that does make frontier living look good, which we've alluded to already, is Daniel Day-Lewis. And I had forgotten that like half of this movie is running. And I should have known, because if you look at the cover, it literally is Daniel Day-Lewis running toward the camera. But you've got him running to save a girl. You've got him running with a gun. You've got them running with a weird hatchet thing. And then you've also just got him running so we can see this beautiful manly hair that he has blowing in the wind, which means it's not just normal running. It's like sexy running because his shirt is open. His chest is strangely waxed for this time period. And it like grounds the whole first half of this movie is just him running. And normally I think that would bother me, but I don't know about you guys, but like I'm here for every moment that he and his dad, because his dad's still sexy. His brother looks good. Like they're a sexy trio running through the frontier, making me want to maybe go take that 50% chance of survival so I can cuddle with him through my first winter.
But we always complain in movies that you never see people reload their weapons, right? They're just firing. This motherfucker never sleeps. Nope. They never rest. They never eat. It is just running. They keep running. Like it goes through day-night cycles where we see them running in the day. It gets night. They're still running. They're tracking. And this is like the zombie apocalypse. Cardio is key. So not only would we not survive in this time frame because of just the difficulty of living, but your cardio better be on point or you're going to die.
Yeah, they definitely do a lot of running, but I think they cut out all the boring stuff and they know their target audience wants to see Daniel Day-Lewis running with the hair blowing, like Ash said. And you said running with a gun. Sometimes he runs with 2 guns. I mean, the guy can do it all.
Completely.
It looks good.
You know, the other actor, speaking of actors in this movie, Wes Studi is a great actor where he's great in everything. And here he plays an antagonist, which is kind of hard because I love him as an actor so much. I'm like, he's trying to kill our good guys, our Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't want him to succeed, but he really brings something to this role that's special.
He does. I mean, he's so good in this. And what I love about this movie is so many of the characters, this is going to sound strange, but like they looked lived in. Like they look like they have the body type of someone who lives in the wilderness and off the land, because he's not like movie 300 ripped, right? He's ripped in a way that it looks like he's having to walk everywhere and move rocks and I don't know, all the things that I figure you do in Frontier's world that makes you look sexy. And his skin is kind of leathery, like he lives out in the sun. And what I love about his performance here is how cold he is. Like he is just so completely zoned in on what it is that he has to do. He's matter of fact. He's decided to murder these girls. He's decided to exact his revenge. And when I was a kid and I saw this for the first time, I was so frightened of him because of how cold and calculating he is. And I think we leave Magua off of those lists of like most epic villains of films of all time. I think he's a pretty epic bad guy.
Well, the reason why I call him an antagonist instead of a villain or a bad guy is because it's all based on your point of view, right? And we're going to talk about this later on, but it's really hard to call him a bad guy because he has motivations that make sense. And so he is scary and he is intimidating and he's a formidable opponent for our protagonists. But I agree 100%. And also, Ash, none of these actors, none of them look like they are from 1992. That's the amazing thing is that when you watch this movie, if we didn't know and you told me this was footage from back then, it's just they all look like they belong in this world.
And Wes, he is hyper intense. He's menacing. And I just bet the actor looks like this always. I picture him at like a kid's birthday party, just being like, happy birthday, like looking really scary. But like you said, he's not a villain, but his intent is very clear. I want to take the gray hair under my knife, but first, I got to let him know I'm going to kill his kids and he's under my knife. Then I'm going to tell him his seed is going to end. Then I'm going to eat his heart. This shit is dark, but he's matter of fact. You understand why he's doing it. It's vengeance. If this was the tale of Magua, you'd be like, yeah, woo, go get gray hair.
He'd be the hero of the story, right? That's the thing. It's all about the perspective. And that's what I think is so neat about this film as we go on and talk about it, is you're really not, we of course are there for the love story, right? That's the whole basis of the book and for this movie is the love story. So if you have someone that's trying to end that, we call them the bad guy. But when you look at it from his point of view, it's completely understandable.
Well, and I have to say, I was a little nervous going back to rewatch. Like, is this going to be a movie where, like, again, the Indians are the bad guys just because they're the Indians? And, like, one of the things that works here is exactly what you're describing, Kevin, is that, like, you see both sides of, like, the motivation. And you've got two Indian tribes that are feuding, and in Hawkeye's family. And then, of course, in Magua, you know, it isn't necessarily that all of the Indians are the bad guys. It's more, who are we going to side with? Well, of course, it's going to be with Daniel Day-Lewis and his people. But Magua, he's a pretty big force to be reckoned with.
But Daniel Day-Lewis, Hawkeye, he plays that perfect character. He's from all the worlds. He's a white guy. He can sympathize with the Native Americans, what's going on. He doesn't care about the politics with the French or the British. He's like, I'm nobody's militia. I'm just going west to Kentucky. You know, I don't care what's going on there. But Daniel Day-Lewis, he is one of the most accomplished actors of our time. When you think of him, you think of Academy Awards. You think of BAFTAs. He's won Golden Globes. He's amazing. And he's one of those guys like Christian Bale who has developed this reputation for being a crazy, over-the-top method actor. Did you ever see Unbearable Likeness of Being?
Yes.
Okay, it's in English. He learned to speak fluent Czech so that his character could speak English with a Czech accent.
Wow.
He said the idea of speaking English with a Czech accent, it would make me feel believable. My Left Foot, where he plays a character could only control his left foot, he was insistent he had to go around set on a wheelchair. For the last Mohicans, he trained to live in the outdoor. He could hand make a canoe. He learned how to run and reload a 12-pound flint stock and fire on the run. He learned to skin animals. He really got into this. For In the Name of the Father, he lost 50 pounds and isolated himself in solitary confinement without food or water for 48 hours at a time because he wanted to be able to get into the mindset of a prisoner. The dude takes his role seriously.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, he's retired now, which is kind of sad, but it's like, look at the commitment he's had throughout his career. And he's phenomenal in everything he's in. So, you know, you got to hand it to him. It definitely works. His methods did pay off. You know, I touched upon this earlier, but one of the things that I really want to get into with this story is the character motivations. And we already mentioned we've got the romance, and we want Hawkeye to, you know, get the girl and them to live happily ever after. But Magua, this guy, he says what happened to him, that the English came in and they killed his family. They murdered his sons, killed his wife, and this dude is out for vengeance, like Big D said earlier. And something you have to think about when you watch films with all these characters is that everyone is the hero of their own story. And I love being able to think about it and actually ask the question to yourself, like, who really is the hero? Who is the villain? And I really appreciate how this film presents it, because you guys touched on it earlier. This film really doesn't clear cut say these guys are good or these guys are bad. They present what the English are doing, what the French are doing, and what Magua's doing, and then what Hawkeye and the last of the Mohicans are doing. And so they present all that to you, and you can root for who you want. But I think that the motivations are all clear, and I like that when they don't try to artificially steer you into saying good versus bad.
So who do we vote for the asshole of the movie?
It's the
Colonel Monroe.
It's got to be. It's got to be.
Yeah.
Everyone else is doing their thing. Him to force the frontiersman to stay. That's the dick move of the movie.
Yeah, him, and then the other guy, the love interest. What's his name?
Duncan.
Yeah, him. Those two together are pretty bad.
Pretty schwarmy.
Well, Cora and Hawkeye are attracted to each other, as are Uncas and Alice. Their party finds the Fort William Henry under siege by the French and their Huron allies, but manage to sneak in. Cora rejects Hayward's marriage proposal, and he becomes jealous of Hawkeye. A militiaman sets out at night to try to reach General Webb at Fort Edward for reinforcements, with Hawkeye, his father, and brother providing covering fire from the fort.
So I decided to look up a little bit of history for this film. I wanted to know how historically accurate it is. And so it's historical fiction. Obviously, a lot of this happened with the French and Indian War and all that. But I was curious about these characters. How many of them were actually real? And so Hawkeye was actually based on a real man, or now it's kind of in question. Is it two people or an amalgamation of both of them? But the one that for the longest time that they said it was based on was Nathaniel Shipman. And he fought for the British in the French and Indian War. And whenever the colonists revolted and during the Revolutionary War, he would not fight against his Indian friends and the British. And so he was actually tarred and feathered and kicked out of there and went to go live in Cooperstown. So Cooperstown was founded by James Fenimore Cooper's father. So where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. And so that's where Cooper got the idea for this story, was based on this guy living in the town that his father founded. So it's really interesting to hear how this story even came to be, and that Nathaniel, was a real guy. Now there is a conflicting report. There's another town nearby that says that no, it was actually David Shipman was the guy. And so, both of these cities are trying to take ownership of the character. But either way, these adventures and tales are based on people that actually lived in the area, fought among the Native Americans. And, that led into the motivations for him to not want to take sides and all of that. I like that. And little things like I read that actually what you mentioned with the messenger that was trying to get away, they kept intercepting these messengers, and that Hawkeye, this Nathaniel Shipman, actually was shooting cover while the messenger got away. So little details like that included that seem very cinematic, were, supposedly real life stories from these guys.
Tar and feather doesn't seem that bad.
It was awful. Your skin came off.
He survived. When I first read that, I was thinking, oh my God, did they basically kill him? But no, I mean, he was tarred and feathered and basically, I guess, just embarrassed and ran out of town.
Yeah, it caused 3rd-degree burns. It was awful.
It's better than being burned at the stake or being scalded.
Sure. But is that our thing? Either being burned at the stake or no pain at all?
Yes, Ash. Back then, that was
in that time period. Yeah,
that was your choice. There was no half measure. There's full measure.
Because he was basically a deserter. If he didn't go against the British, who all the colonists were fighting against, then he was a traitor, I guess. So
yeah, he'd be hanged. But I think with this movie and a lot of other ones that we, say are in that upper echelon, that are epic, that are special movies that you remember, that are iconic, they have one thing in common. They usually have a theme song that you hear it and you know what it is immediately. The theme, the Gale, it fucking rocks. Mm-hmm. This is the multi-purpose, I think, Swiss Army knife of songs. Normally, if you get, let's say Rocky can fire you up. You hear the theme song, Eye of the Tiger. It gets you going. Or Titanic with My Heart Will Go On. It gets you romantic and think. Ash is shaking her head, but for most people, you think, about
Celine
love.
Dion does not turn me on.
Well, you don't talk about turning you on like Daniel Day-Lewis.
You said get you going. I mean, what else do you mean by that?
No, Rocky. That
but you're saying all romancy. That doesn't make me feel like romance. It makes me think of how bony her collarbone is in that video.
It makes you think of Love Lost or, about just tragedy.
You're supposed to picture Leo's face when you hear the song.
I mean, I'll picture Leo's face, but not with that in the background. That sounds terrible.
but this song, you get everything. When they play it during battle, it makes you fired up. You want to get out there. You want to get into the battle. It can also do hope and dread simultaneously. There's times where you're like, oh, what's going to happen? The theme's on. Either somebody's going to fall in love or somebody's going to die. The film without this, I don't think is as memorable as it is now.
Yeah, I'm with you, Big D. And I was really surprised to read that this wasn't done by some famous composer that we would know the name of, right? Like we know our Alan Silvestris and John Williams and Danny Elfman's, but they took this song, like you mentioned, and used it as a theme. And it's such an effective theme. A movie that I know Big D saw, both of you saw it, The Batman does a very similar thing. That theme by Michael Giacchino, it can be used to ramp things up. It's slowed down and gets that emotional impact, and that's exactly what this one does.
Absolutely. And it does feel like very epic, sweeping romance, right? And so when they play it behind just a glance between these two characters of, Madeleine Stowe's character and Daniel Day-Lewis's, you can't help but feel a lot. And I am not, spoiler alert, not that anyone who listens to this wouldn't believe this, I'm not a really sentimental person. I don't believe in love at first sight, but I do believe in lust at first sight. And I think that rarely is depicted well in movies. It's usually in a bar or club scene, and it's just kind of gross. But here, we have a perfect example of just how real animalistic attraction is. And the way that Daniel Day-Lewis and Madeleine Stowe look at each other, it's It's like they want to literally like eat one another apart. It's ridiculously hot. And what I love is that like, they don't really even like make out heavy. Like they barely touch in this movie. But when he does touch her, it's like this grab on the back of her neck and he nuzzles her like a big strong horseman, and like it's just amazing. And like I could watch the two of them like brute and stare at one another, but between like jail cell bars or behind a waterfall, like for 2 straight hours and see nothing else in this movie.
See, but again, I don't want to inject my 2022 thoughts here, but now if I go to the gym and I want to get romantic, I immediately think I got to take a shower. It's a courteous thing, right, Ash? Do you want sweaty sex? Because to me, sex in like 1757, I don't know how sexy it is. It's smelly. It's gross. They've been running nonstop day and night through the forest. There's blood caked on. There's body fluids. They're not washing their hands. It's kind of gross. You got Cora's running around with that dress. She's sweaty and yeasty, and it's kind of nasty. And worst of all, without razors, did you picture hairy oral sex on the frontier?
I mean, yeah.
Oh,
like they barely have anything to live for. Like they're in this shitty world. Like it's like not a fun place to be. Like that's got to be the one thing you hang on to. And it's not like they don't have a river. Like she can go in the river and then come out of the river before they have sweaty sex.
Yeah, I think it's I know what you mean, Big D, and I'm sure it wouldn't be appealing to us now, but when that's all you know, and the animalistic tendencies, like you said, there's just this magnetism between them, and it's believable. So really, I think that for the time period, it does seem like these two would be very into what was going on.
I mean, I've had Mardi Gras sex, and I feel like that's not a whole lot different than what you're describing here. And it was good.
Your sex?
So,
that's drunken sex.
No, but like it's like Mardi Gras sex. You're like out with all these people and you're sweaty and you're covered in bodily fluids and you're on Bourbon Street where the street's wet even though it hasn't rained in weeks. Like, it's got to be kind of the same thing, and it's all right.
I almost found myself wishing we would have gotten like an establishing shot where you see Duncan in the distance, like just kind of looking at them with his sad face as they start making out, and he's like,
I know.
That was you, friend. It's because that was you.
Yeah.
Oh, well, speaking of romance, guys, how romantic is this when Duncan proposes to Cora and says that, the attraction and the love will come later, let's just get married first and see how it works out. I feel horrible thinking about how many women were pushed into marriages like that back in the day. And her performance, just through her body language as he's doing all the talking, and you can see it in her eyes, like, no, I'm not into this. And I'll let you know, like, I'll let me think about this. It's just horrific. I felt so bad for her, and Duncan is completely oblivious to what's going on.
Yeah, he really kind of makes your skin crawl, and that ponytail, the way it flips around whenever he moves his head judgmentally, like it doesn't help. Like he's so gross. And they did such a good job casting this actor next to Daniel Day-Lewis, because this actor objectively is not a bad looking guy in like real life, but compared to Daniel Day-Lewis and the way he's dressed in this, he just doesn't look great. And I love what they did where they show this juxtaposition of like her lack of attraction with, Duncan, and her incredible, like animalistic, like I can't not be around this man attraction to Hawkeye, because it couldn't be more different. And that's what kind of makes this love triangle not even like a love triangle. It's just like him being like a third wheel as they be all sexy with each other.
But like the thing is too, from if you're trying to get into her point of view, you've got Duncan's this stuffy officer guy who she just doesn't feel the attraction to, and Daniel Day-Lewis is this like rugged mountain man, right? Like it's two completely different people, and there is no chemistry. Not the actors, they're doing everything they need to do, but the characters, there's no chemistry there. Like this guy, I don't know what he's even trying to do here other than maybe impress his boss, and marry into the family.
See, Big D, Duncan is the guy that takes the shower in the river before the sex.
No.
He isn't what you want. You want the sweaty bodily fluid dude.
No,
Daniel
listen,
Day-Lewis.
Duncan Duncan is the sensitive one who holds up the entire like wagon train.
Oh my God, you're taking this too personally, Big D.
Because the girls are sleepy. They need to stop. Yes, Mog was right. The white man treats their women like dogs. You know, they let them control them. Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't do that. And I was Duncan. And for a long time, that was me. Yes, that was me. And it's painful today to think of.
I'm sorry. Do you need a moment?
No, I'm over it.
Okay.
No, I went full blown the other way. That was how I balanced my
before
life.
sex, and that's how you got Vanessa.
Now dirty, sweaty sex. Hell yeah, I'm all about it.
Go to the gym beforehand. Make sure you're extra sweaty.
Yeah, throw like a wet towel on the bed. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Get her all yeasty.
Oh, extra smelly. Yep. Shave my shit. We're going full jungle today.
Let that bush go. Let it fly free.
Yeah. Search for it. Let's go.
Search for it. That's half the fun. It's finding it.
The search party's out.
The whispering eye is there. After Monroe refuses to honor a promise that the militiamen could leave to protect their homesteads if they were threatened, Hawkeye helps the militiamen sneak away and is sentenced to hang. Monroe is forced to accept the French general's terms of surrender. The British can leave the fort honorably with their arms. Once Monroe, his soldiers, and civilians leave the fort, Huron warriors massacre them, and Magua personally cuts out Monroe's heart. Hawkeye and his family fight their way out, taking Cora, Alice, Hayward, and a few British soldiers, but Magua finds them, before Hawkeye, Uncas, and their father escape by leaping from the waterfall. Hawkeye tells Cora to stay alive and swears that he will find her. So we've talked a lot about the sexy parts of this movie, but the battle scenes in this movie are pretty amazing. I love, most importantly, how chaotic they are. So I've obviously never been in war, especially a war like this, because we don't fight them like this anymore. But I imagine it had to be crazy chaotic. People are coming from every direction. You don't know where death is going to come from. You don't know what to do. And I think they show that here in a really effective way. And it also gives us an opportunity to see the three main characters in action. And I have to tell you, the way that they fight is so badass. And I know Gene's not here to tell me if it's true or not, but I was pretty blown away by how they moved, by how quick they were. And even Cora herself, I think she shows that she's not just some skirt in this movie. Like, she protects her sister. She tries to make sure that they're safe. And she's pretty badass too.
I think this is a really early example of that, where in movies now, you know, we get a lot more of the women that are kicking ass and action movies and all that. But here, I mean, she picks up that pistol and shoots that guy right in the head. You didn't see a lot of that in films in the time period. And also, like what you were saying about the action and the chaotic nature of it, Ash, I really was impressed too by everything going on in the background, all the little detail that you see that isn't just right at the forefront, but they do a really good job of seeing the chaos of people running in the background and people trying to reload but getting killed, and all of that going on at once, which takes a really skillful director to pull all that together. And Michael Mann certainly is very good at what he does. And I think this is definitely among some of his best work.
I agree. The action scenes, I think, are great. There's no pantomiming like we saw in Scarface, where people are just, if you focus on a couple background actors. But guys, how are we not talking about the fact that fucking Hawkeye does not miss a single shot?
Yeah.
This is a flintlocked, like, musket. And he is sniping. Oh, I got my silk. I'm going to wrap like an extra 40 yards. He does not miss hitting a single person center mass. There's about 4 or 5 last second saves where somebody is about to bury a blade into Cora. We didn't need all that. The tension was there. Have somebody be a little further away and you get them with you. Maybe you throw your axe at them or whatever it is. But it's, other than that, okay. But we didn't need this miraculous, flintlock sniper. But the military tactics back then, I just found them laughable. We talked in Braveheart how everybody would say, okay, we shall meet out in the field at 1200 hours and do battle. Back then, it was so different. You'd schedule a time. You'd go in the open field. It's comical when you see the English line up in rank in their traditional firing squads in the middle of an ambush in a forest. This is not going to work. They're wearing their bright red coats with the gold like emplets and all the stuff that's not camouflage. They've got a fucking drummer with them. You know you're going to get caught. This is ridiculous. The ceremony when they're presenting the flags and the French general is waving his hat and they're speaking pleasantries. It's just how ridiculous. After your first slaughter, aren't you going to sit down and be like, hey, guys, this isn't going to work. Let's try something new.
Yeah. Well, and to your other point, Big D, when you talk about Hawkeye and how good he is with a rifle, I mean, this is a superhero before superhero movies. Like you've got, I mean, his name is Hawkeye. There's a character that was literally inspired by this man named Hawkeye who uses a bow and arrow for Marvel, who is a sharpshooter, right? So this character, yeah, he does seem superhuman. But here's one thing, though, if we're going to talk about little qualms here. Hawkeye, whenever he helps his friends, so we didn't really mention, but the deal that the militiamen made with the English was, yeah, we'll come fight for you, but if the French are going to come in and take out our village, then we want to be able to go back and save them, which of course is ridiculous that they would ever even pretend that they would let them go leave the war for that. But anyway, that ends up happening. And so Hawkeye's like, hey, I'm going to help you guys get out. He lets a few of the guys escape and go back and try to salvage what they can of their land. But the thing is, the next day after those guys escape, they come and put Hawkeye in handcuffs. And they're like, you helped these guys escape. Did I miss something? Or where was the proof of that? They left in the night. A few of them got away. And then they come and say, hey, you helped them, Hawkeye. I don't understand where they jumped to that conclusion.
Oh, I think because it was correct. I think he's like, well, General Monroe's a pretty astute dude. He's pretty pragmatic. He knows he's in trouble. And Hawkeye threatens him 2 or 3 times. He says, hey, you have to let the frontiersmen go. He says, it's settled. They can't go. He brings it up again. Then he goes and tells the frontiersmen. Then finally, when they disappear, I can understand it. But I would have taken all 3 of them into custody. But I'm glad we don't waste any time. You said it was 2 hours, but this movie is going along. It's a pretty fast pace. They don't waste any time. I don't expect them to have any evidence. It's good. You know, we get to see there that Duncan's a bit schwarmy. That Duncan reaffirms why Cora doesn't want to be with him. He's not a man of his word. And you know why she doesn't love him. And I got to take this back now, talking about Cora, when she sees how Duncan is. And we were talking about sex and romance. The sacrifice that these people had to make back then for the families, the ones you loved, or what you expected of life. When they're finally in that scene where they're underneath the waterfall, there's no way that Hawkeye can save him. Hawkeye doesn't have any more powder left. He can't stay. In movies today, we would get some miraculous fairy tale where they're going to jump out the water together. They're going to survive. There's going to be a miraculous rescue. In this, there's not. He looks at the woman he loved and he says, submit. No matter what happens, just take it. Just take it. Stay alive, no matter how long it takes. He is telling her, go with Magua. If you're raped, just take it. If you're beaten, just take it. As long as it takes, I will find you. The harsh reality of this love, man, it's stark when you think about how we are today. And it made me really appreciate and just think about back then, the sacrifices you were expected to make.
Yeah, but I mean, he's telling her he's going to take care of her, right? Like I think he more than anything is trying to give her something to hold on to because he knows like the horrors that she like potentially could go through. And this is like something that she could have, like that little thing of like, well, he could still come and find me. He could still come and save me, because what happens, spoiler, to her sister at the end, I think is a pretty common thing that happened in this time period, that when their men were gone and these women didn't know what to do, like a lot of them, I think probably would have jumped off a cliff the way that Alice does at the end of this movie. And this is that little nugget of hope that'll hopefully keep her going.
Yeah, I really, really liked this too. I think that's great that they didn't pull out the miraculous save like Big D was saying. The fact that, I mean, if they tried to escape, if these 2 women would have jumped into a waterfall, they would have drowned under it, most likely. There's no way they would have survived that. The best chance that he had was for them to be captured, like for them to survive. And so as sad as it is, or as heartbreaking as it is that they had to leave, that romantic gesture of, I will find you, stay alive, I will do anything I can to get you back. That's what really at the heart of this movie makes it so special, is this undying romance that they are willing to sacrifice everything just to be with one another.
Well, Magua takes his 3 prisoners to a Huron settlement. Hawkeye walks in unarmed as a parley to plead for their lives. A chief rules that Hayward is to be returned to the British, Alice be given to Magua for the wrongs done to him by Monroe, and Cora be burned alive. Although Hawkeye is told he may leave in peace for his bravery, he offers to take Cora's place. Hayward, who is acting as interpreter, instead tells the Hurons to take his life for Cora's. After Cora leaves the village with Hawkeye, he shoots Hayward, who is being burned alive, as a final act of mercy.
This part was so fascinating to me, and I love to see how even if it isn't 100% historically accurate, still it is based on the type of rulings that would have gone on at the time. And when that chief makes these decisions that you just mentioned, it's really interesting to see how it's like an eye for an eye kind of a thing. They're very methodical and saying, well, this happened to you, and you need your payback, and this is because you were brave and you did this. So in exchange, you get to keep your life, and all these rulings handed out. I just wanted to ask you guys, if you were in the position of Magua, right? And we're talking about who's the villain, who's the hero here. When you see that Cora's father is the one that led an army to come in and brutally murder his family and his tribe, I mean, at this time, when you take justice into your own hands, would either of you not have gone and tried to take your vengeance?
Oh, 100%. I'm surprised. I wouldn't have taken him past the waterfall. If you want to, you bring back just Duncan as a tribute to the tribe. There's no way I would have risked it because, like you said, it could have gone the other way.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the weakest part of the story, is the fact that Magua, his only thing to live for now is to get vengeance for his family. So probably the least believable part is letting those women live. And it is sad because from our point of view, we see these women are innocent. They the only crime they committed was being born to a father who would carry out these atrocities. So it's very heartbreaking. But from Magua's point of view, he's there to punish, their father, and the only way he can ensure that, like his bloodline not continuing, that theirs won't, is to take justice into his own hands. So, not saying that, especially in today's day, that any of that is right or that you should do that, but you understand where he's coming from. Yeah. And I just think that's really interesting to look at when you see his motivations, and also how the chief gives him that ruling and says, okay, well, someone has to pay for these crimes. And so we'll kill one of the daughters, and then you can also take one of the daughters to continue your bloodline. So he kind of flips it a little bit and says, okay, your sons were murdered, but you will have a chance to, get your bloodline back. So really interesting stuff.
But he could do that anyway, right? Like, he's a man. He can go and father some more kids. Like, his bloodline is not set to end unless they castrated him, which they didn't give us any reason to think that happened.
But that's in the director's cut.
Right, that's in the director's cut. Monroe keeps poetic. It around his neck.
It's more of a poetic justice, I would think.
But I don't necessarily think that this is his weakness. I think it's showing his commitment to his people. Like, this is the way they did things. He would not just do something on his own. He goes to the chief like he's supposed to. This is what he would have done back then. I think it's very accurate because he believes that this chief is the ultimate seat of justice and the ultimate seat of wisdom. And so he brings them to him to have him rule. And only after he rules the way he doesn't want do you see that he's going to go now to another person. But I don't think he feels like he can. I think he knows he can kill Monroe. That's totally fine under Indian law, right? Native American law, as it's depicted here. He can do that, but I think he knows it's a stretch to take that one step further. And so I think that's what you're seeing, is him going and trying to get someone above him, give him the permission to do this, and he knows he's not supposed to.
No, you guys are missing it. Magua was not anticipating that Nathaniel Poe Esquire was going to show up with Indian law. You didn't think Hawkeye was going to come swinging out there and present such a great Indian legal argument on why he should be able to switch places. I think if Hawkeye doesn't show up, Magua gets what he wants. Exactly what he wants. He sells back Duncan for money, and he gets one of the girls killed, and he takes the other one with him.
I think so too, because I think that's what you see before he shows up. The ruling was pretty much all done, and I like that when Hawkeye Esquire comes in there and pleads, and it makes sense. He does that last ditch effort for the save, and it's I mean, it works. It's effective in the film for sure. Yeah. The dramatic tension there is really good.
Yeah, and I have to say, clearly Duncan Hayward here pays the ultimate price. And when I was a kid, I saw this. We can chalk this up to another film that my parents let me see way too early. And I remember watching this guy get burned alive, and I was so scared as a kid of this scene. And I I know it's not that graphic. I know other movies have more graphic burning alive scenes than this, but it was the first one I had ever seen. And the way he reacts, the fact that he's crying, I had never seen a man react that way when he was in pain, because I've shared before, like, my dad is like this actual war hero and he's like the toughest dude that's ever lived, where like he'd like cut his arm open and like he wouldn't flinch. Like, so I had never seen a man react that way. And something about that shook me like to the core. And so much so that I can't watch it. I actually fast forwarded through this scene so I didn't have to watch it even now at 38, because I saw it for the first time at 9. And now, 29 years later, I still can't watch Duncan get burned alive because it's scary.
It's a good scene, and the actor Stephen Waddington does a really good job in the role throughout, because it's when the bad guys that you love to hate, they're really good at making you feel that way, right? And so he does that here, and you have to remember, it's okay, that's just an actor, like, he's doing his job and he's doing it well. And I really liked at the end. I mean, call me hokey or whatever, but I liked the sacrifice there, because in my mind, from my perspective, Duncan has done a lot of bad stuff. Like, I mean, just toward the beginning of the movie, he straight up lied, breaking the promise from the English that the militia could go back to their homes. And so he's done some really terrible things. And so I saw it as this grand romantic gesture. Like, I know I've done bad things. And to me, he gets that redemption when Hawkeye says, hey, trade me for her. And Duncan ends up actually saying, no, take me, Duncan, instead of Cora. And so I really liked that gesture to me, that he got that little bit of redemption.
See, I think it's so funny the way that we saw this so differently, because I was going, oh, okay.
Yes.
Like, I don't think he does it to save Cora. I think he does it so he's the one that saves her. I don't think he's thinking of Hawkeye at all. I think this guy is so gross. And I think that's why he's crying. I think he's crying like, fuck, what did I do?
Yes.
I don't know. Like, I didn't find him to be redemptive at all at the end of this movie. I still think he's just a total, like, weasel.
I thought this was the ultimate beta move. It was like, I'm going to protect you, and expecting Cora to be like, no, I was wrong about you, Duncan, and to like look at him as he's going off.
Hawkeye.
Yes, that's what he was hoping for. And when she just turns and hugs Hawkeye and like leaves, he's like, oh, that didn't work out like I planned.
Oh, wow. Maybe I think the best of people.
You do. Kevin, you got the best heart.
Kevin, you're too nice.
Yes, you're the best.
No justice for Duncan.
No, stay that way, Kevin. Don't change.
Chingachgook, Uncas, and Hawkeye pursue Magua's party to rescue Alice. Uncas races ahead and is killed in a duel by Magua and thrown off the cliff's edge. Alice refuses to remain with Magua and commits suicide by jumping off the same cliff. Hawkeye and Chingachgook catch up and slay some of the Hurons. Hawkeye then holds the rest at gunpoint, allowing his father to fight and kill Magua, avenging Uncas's death. Afterward, Chingachgook prays to the Great Spirit to receive Uncas, proclaiming himself the last of the Mohicans.
This part really got to me, this ending. I'm a romantic at heart, and I just think that the performances here, the writing, and really, it was really captivating stuff that got me emotional. When you talk about Legends of the Fall earlier, man, I'm a blubbering mess at the end of that movie. That's
me too.
And so this moment reminded me of one of those great cinematic moments with the sacrifice and trying to get that vengeance and the good guys prevailing. And there is something really primal about this where, today we don't handle things this way, but you're talking about the 1700s, and there is something so great about rooting for the person that you want to win, get that justice. But it's heartbreaking. This is a romance, and our two heroes get to, ride off into the sunset together, but not without a lot of tragedy. And watching Uncas go to his death because he's trying to protect his family, and then Alice, who is in love with him, deciding, well, obviously I don't want this future with Magua and his people, and so I've got nothing else to live for, and to throw herself off that cliff. And now Cora has to deal with not only her father has died, but her sister, and basically her and Hawkeye are the only two people they have left. I mean, you've got the father, but then he gives that speech about he's the last of the Mohicans, the last of his people, and that won't last forever, and that's a heartbreaking moment. So a really effective pulling at the heartstrings moment for this whole final act.
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing the way that Alice just resigns herself to die, and then the indifference that Magua has to her death is really haunting. And Big D, you talked about the score earlier. I think this is where it's the most effective because they sweep around. Michael Mann did such a great job with the way he set the scene, where he sweeps that camera around and it's expansive, just the holes of like the mountains behind her, and it zooms in on her face and you can see that she's just dead inside. Like she just isn't going to live, and she just so strongly takes the choice to walk off that cliff and die in a really awful way. I think that it's really moving, and I didn't remember how strong of an ending this movie had, but it was pretty powerful.
Yeah, and I think give credit to Dante Spinotti, who is the cinematographer, and he's done several Michael Mann films. But it's a gorgeously captured film, and really the effective use, like you said, of that camera. And when you get those close-ups of the character who say everything without saying anything, it is phenomenal. And that this is one of the most touching moments was between Alice, more so than even the other characters, when she makes that decision. And Wes Studi too. Got to give credit again to this phenomenal actor reaching his hand out. Come on. And you see that in her eyes, just nothing there, empty.
See, but I found myself, again, earlier I said he had one note, which was terrifying intensity. Here, there's almost a loving nature.
It's a lifeline, right? He's throwing her a lifeline.
He sees what's going on. He's kind of, I think, maybe internalized what's going on. Like, not these thought, ooh, an eye for an eye. This if ever keeps going, we're going to all be blind. No, but I feel like he's saying, it won't be that bad. I found myself, granted, I'm a man, so I tried to put myself in her position. Would I be submissive to Magua and let him have his way with me, sweaty frontier sex? Again, she's young. Would she think that that was, something that she could live with? And then 2 seconds later, when she falls, Magua just goes, he gives zero fuck and just walks off.
Yeah.
Ash, would you have given your life a chance with Magua? To see, because maybe it's not that bad. Maybe Magua could be nice. Thing,
and I don't want to critique Alice here because her guy has just died, but I would have waited it out to see if the other two were coming for me, because if she had just held on and not jumped for 6 minutes, she would have been okay because Magua would be dead. But I think that what they do a really good job of with Alice versus Cora here is Cora is so different than the other women of this time. She's not like what most women in her position were like. Alice is she is completely helpless. The greatest disservice that men did to women in this time period was that they rendered them utterly helpless. And so Alice has nothing. She doesn't know what to do. She's a child. She has only ever been taken care of. And so I could see it, but I would have held on. I would have killed him in his sleep.
I just think it's this is basically a romance novel, right? The whole
yes.
The whole book was founded upon this romantic scene. I actually, the little bit of the history again that I looked up was that in 1824, Cooper was taking an English aristocrat who would go on to be a future prime minister on a tour of New York. And they go to this waterfall and the guy says, hey, this would be a great setting for a romance story. And the guy goes and writes this book. The whole thing is founded on romance and a setting and all of that. And so I think that when it's in a story, when you're faced with life or death and love or never having love again, that's the grand romantic gesture. What do I have to live for? And so I think from her point of view of the character, it's what else is there? My father's gone. The person I love is gone. And I think it was, maybe a little bit of an abrupt decision, but that's the romantic storytelling.
Well, now is the time where we give you our wipe score. 5 wipes is terrible. It's that sweaty, dirty, hairy, frontier oral sex. And 0 wipes is a perfect film. It's snuggling into that Daniel Day-Lewis beautiful manly mane as you stare out at the mountain view in the distance. So to get us started, Kevin, what's your wipe score for Last of the Mohicans?
I think this is a solid historical fiction with a great romance at the heart of it. the costumes, production design, the cinematography they talked about, that theme, I think it is one of the great themes, which is it's so moving with the story and tells so many emotions. Really fantastic. So I liked it a lot. Daniel Day-Lewis, fantastic performance. Wes Studi, we talked about the acting. This is a great film. There were some moments where it felt a little bit like a romance novel, and maybe I'm just not the target audience for that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there were points of the movie where I'm just like, okay, it's getting a little bit hokey, but most of the time it was effective. So you definitely have to give it credit for that. And they knew what they were trying to do with this film. And I appreciated some of the historical accuracies. Talking about it with you guys has really made me appreciate it even more. And I think I'm actually going to change my score a little bit. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry if if this ruined your calculations. But
No.
I was going before recording. I was going back and forth. One wipe. I'm feeling 1.5-ish. But I'm going to settle on one wipe for this film.
Nice.
Wow. Look
Heaven
at us
flexible.
changing your mind with that frontier sexiness.
That was it. It was really Big D's description of dirty, gross frontier sex that did it.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Well, I think this is a great movie. It's my kind of love story. It's got great action, an amazing score. I think it's got a really moving plot. I think that it moves quickly. It didn't feel 2 hours long. I think it's absolutely beautifully shot. I think that it's absolutely beautifully set to an incredible score. And for me, I think the only weakness here is that some meat on who these characters are would have maybe made it better. While I love the whole romantic, let's throw ourselves off the mountain after Uncas, we don't really get any chemistry between them other than a couple of glances. That would have been nice to have some moments between them, but it's so good and it's so much better than average. I think that it is 1.25 wipes.
For me, I think it's why you go to the movies. You can sit down, the story just envelops you. You don't look at your watch. I didn't feel the 2 hours at all. The performances are great. The scenery is beautiful. The historical accuracy is enough that you can sit back and you're not questioning what's going on. I had emotional attachment to this movie, but I think it held up. I think if you want to do frontier romance wrong, go see Far and Away. This movie is a tale that you can see from multiple points of view. I really loved it. I think it's a beautiful film. It's something that I'm proud to now own for $4.99. I'll go back and watch the director's commentary in full. I'm going to give it a 0.75 wipe.
All right. Well, with Kevin's 1 wipe, my 1.25 wipes, and Big D's 0.75 wipes, we're going to give Last of the Mohicans a score of 1 wipe.
So Ash, with a score of 1 wipe, that now ties Last of the Mohicans in the 44 spot with The Empire Strikes Back, Conan the Barbarian, Rounders, Terminator, Back to the Future 2, Toy Story, Tremors, and Sling Blade.
I like it. I think it's good.
It's a good grouping.
I don't see how anybody could not think this is at least a good, enjoyable film.
Or just a well-made film, too, right? This is truly well-made cinema.
I think it will be interesting when we have Dances with Wolves coming up on the schedule,
right?
To compare that and this, that'll be interesting because, like you said, I think that one's a bit longer. I think that one's got more character development.
That's a 2 VHSer.
Yeah, that's
sure.
That's a 2-day rental. Yeah, that's it.
Well, and I think what we show on this one is that epic does not mean epic time frame, where it's got to be a 3-hour film to make it an epic movie. Because this feels as epic as Titanic. It feels as epic as Braveheart. It does, and it doesn't have the same runtime. So I think that Michael Mann, he did a pretty good job with what he had. And I also just want to say, thank God that this is the one podcast, Kevin, we've done where The Fifth Element did not come up at any point in the wipe scores. So I feel good about that. Mm-hmm. Big D, what we got coming up next week?
So next week, we've got a very different film, even though we're staying with the military theme. Bunker Hill Academy has been targeted by real estate developers for demolition. The students, outraged by the thought of their school being turned into condominiums, vows to fight back. Led by Cadet Major Brian Moreland, they stage a school-wide rebellion that ends with them in charge of the campus. After winning over the headmaster, Brian and his fellow cadets face their toughest battle yet with the Army. Commissioned by Jamie L., came out in 1981 And this one has some great actors who were very young at the time. So it'll be interesting to see how it holds up.
This is one I have never seen, ever. So I'm looking forward to that. Well, thanks so much to our commissioner, Daniel. We really appreciate it. And Kevin, thanks so much for joining us again. You want to tell everybody out there where they can find you when you're not guesting on this pod?
Well, thank you again. Like I said, it's always a pleasure joining you fine folks here. And, I'm also happy to get out of the sports category. Not that I didn't enjoy those, but I don't particularly consider myself a sports expert. So thank you for having me back on for one a little different. And if you are interested in listening to my podcast, it's called Real Spoilers, real with 2 E's. And what we do is we usually tackle the biggest movie of the week, unless there's nothing coming out that week. And, we spoil it in depth. So just like the title says, we like to think of ourselves as a book club for movies, just like going out to see a movie and then meeting up with a group of friends or having a beer and discussing it. We're going to go through all the plot points and spoil the crap out of the thing. So if spoilers are not something you're worried about, or if you've already seen the film, come join that discussion. Follow us at Real Spoilers on social media, facebook.com/Real Spoilers. And we have a Facebook group called the League of Show Sharers, where that's where a lot of the discussion goes about the episodes and just really anything film related. And you can follow me personally on Twitter at Kevin R. Brackett.
Yeah, and I want to give a special shout out to your Batman episode. It was fantastic. So if you've seen the movie, go check out Kevin and their crew's kind of debrief on it, because I thought it was pretty fun.
Thank you very much.
After I'd seen the Batman, I immediately, within like 3 minutes, was DMing Kevin. So I was like, I got to talk to somebody. Who would I talk to? Kevin Brackett.
There you go. Well, it's always a pleasure discussing film with you guys, and I'm glad that we can mix it up here a little bit and ask me back on anytime.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can also email us at host@shatthemovies.com. You can support our podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, completing a free anonymous survey to help attract advertisers, buy our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all the information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, Lovecraft Country, True Detective, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. You can find all the information on our website, shatpod.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Kevin Brackett, please join us next time on our next podcast, where we'll review the following movie.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have been informed that Bunker Hill Academy is to be closed. An end to nearly a century and a half of tradition, and an end to the heart of us.
Sir, how can they do this?
With the stroke of a pen, sir. Their field of honor was a desktop.
The lady said the proprietors ordered the school closed. Now, as I see it, we are the proprietors.
You tell us where you put those weapons, or this will be the sorriest day of your life.
All right, we have 3 demands. They're very reasonable. When they're met, we'll be happy to return every weapon, every shell.
You say we. Who else?
Number 1, I want a meeting with General May.
Now,
you stay where you are, Sheriff. Everyone in here is here because they want to be here.
Our son would not be involved in something like this.
Lady, if my son can be involved in it, your son can be involved in it.
My men, our tanks, our helicopters, we will take this campus.
So anybody who isn't 100% sure of what we're doing, take 1 step forward. Attention! Oh, Major Mullen, he's our man. Major Mullen, he's our man. They don't scare us, do they, Charlie?
No, sir. Me neither, sir. They don't scare me. What in God's name did they teach you in here?
You and I have nothing more to talk about.
Cut that part out. If that was on there. All right. Y'all make fun of me.
I'm not going to make fun of you.
Okay. You ready?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
I know it's just weird because Gene's usually here. It's just weird. Okay.